The organizers of the event are UBI Lab Arts, UBI Lab Network, Basic Income Ireland, and UBI Lab Leeds. I will briefly present UBI Lab Network and Leeds and provide a brief introduction to our topic. UBI Lab Leeds is part of the international UBI Lab Network. I would like to thank UBI Lab Network for the financial, technical, and organizational support of our event tonight. Our common goal is the advocacy and achievement of a basic income for everybody. Therefore, we will call it Universal Basic Income. Our reasons to advocate for universal basic income: we experience an apocalypse of polycrisis on our planet Earth at the moment. Apocalypse means revelation in the Greek language. Our revelation is about an economic and political system which is failing most people, and above all, young and future generations and the self-employed, including artists. What has this revelation to do with basic income? System failure requires system change. The introduction of a basic income in society is part of a system change. Basic income can help to address many challenges in our world, such as the economic and ecological crisis. Sandhya Anatharahman has created the phrase, basic income doesn't solve every problem, but it makes every problem easier to solve. And money is power in our society. Universal basic income would mean money for everybody and therefore an empowerment of people in our societies. We think that the basic income for the arts pilot scheme in Ireland is an important step in the right political direction. Therefore, UBI Lab Arts, Basic Income Ireland, UBI Lab Network, and UBI Lab Leeds are very happy to host this third event on the pilot, Basic Income for the Arts in Ireland, What Have We Learned After 14 Months? I will briefly introduce the concept of basic income, the strengths and limitations of trials and pilot schemes, followed by a member from Basic Income Ireland and Andy from the UBI Lab Arts. The following may be a repetition for some who participated in our previous events, but I cannot assume that everybody has been there, so I will repeat the concept of basic income as defined by the Basic Income Earth Network, or also called BN. Basic income is a periodic payment. It's paid at regular intervals, for example, every month, not as a one-off grant. It's a cash payment. Basic income is paid in an appropriate medium of exchange, allowing those who receive it to decide what they spend it on. It's not therefore paid either in kind, such as food or services, or in vouchers dedicated to a specific use. It's also paid on an individual basis, which is different from most social security measures at the moment, so it's not paid to the household. So individuals can decide how to use this money. And it's universal. Basic income is paid to all without means test. And finally, it's unconditional. Basic income is paid without a requirement to work or to demonstrate willingness to work. So other important factors of a basic income are the financing of basic income through fees on the use of our different commons or different taxes, and closure of tax havens and closure of tax loopholes or tax exemptions. Also, the implementation of basic income through the state or municipalities or an independent commons wealth fund are other important questions. Now, what are the strengths and limitations of basic income pilots and trials? First, I will speak a bit about the strengths. So trials and pilots generate publicity and awareness among people about basic income. The basic income pilot with artists in Ireland raises awareness about basic income around the world and informs people in the art sector about basic income. Artists can play a very important role in societies to spread the concept of basic income and mobilize people in favor of basic income. However, there are also important limitations. Many trials have a small number of participants and can only generate some limited evidence. This is due to the limited finance available for most basic income studies. However, even big trials, such as the one in Finland with with 2,000 participants in 2017-18, are critiqued by opponents of basic income that the positive evidence is insufficient or not strong enough to be convincing. First, this is due to the fact that all UBI basic income trials have certain obvious limitations, and some aspects such as universality, permanence, and financing of basic income cannot be tested in a trial or pilot. Second, the same results of a trial are interpreted in different ways and are unlikely to convince political opponents of universal basic income. And this brings me to the most important third point. Unfortunately, we live in an age of ideology-based policymaking and ideology-based evidence-making, especially when it comes to major policy changes such as a universal basic income. This is contrary to the widespread contemporary talk about evidence-informed policymaking. Examples are the climate crisis, where there has been strong evidence for at least the past 30 years, but no decisive action has been taken up to now. We have strong evidence about the disastrous effects of poverty, inequality, and precarity on mental, social, and physical health, but no decisive action has been taken in this area. Therefore, this Irish pilot with artists is very important to mobilize people in favor of a universal basic income as a new social contract and a foundation for a good life for everybody in society. The pilot may also produce some positive and hopefully convincing evidence. The Irish government has just published the initial 6 months impact assessment. You can find the link in the chat. There are also other BI basic income pilots and trials taking place around the world, for example, in the United States, in America, in Brazil, in Catalonia, in Spain, in India, and in Kenya. Finally, I would like to welcome some US-American artists to our webinar. They will report during the general discussion about their experience participating in local basic income pilots in the USA. I pass now on to a member from Basic Income Ireland, Ryan, who will inform you about the specific Irish context of this pilot. Thank you for listening, and you will find the event outline in the chat in a few seconds. Thank you. Over to Anne.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Reinhard. I'm Anne from Basic Income Ireland. There's been a campaign for Basic Income Ireland in Ireland for about 40 years now, and I suppose there might be a little bit of a bigger moment now with the talk that's around the basic income trial for artists. So I just want to bring you quickly up to date about where we are with our advocacy at the moment, and mostly that consists of just a report on a conference that we held on the 8th of November, just a month ago. So this conference was to bring together the elements of the heart and the head. So the heart being, as we thought of it, the reasons, all the good reasons, the kind of things Reinhard has outlined about why we should have basic income in place as one of the necessary things we need into the future, but also to show the head part of it, the figures and the number crunching about how it could be financed. So we got quite a lot of media attention for this conference, probably because it was opened for us by the Minister for the Arts, Catherine Martin, TD. She opened the conference for us. She was very clear and frank about the difficulties and the political capital that it took to get the basic income scheme for artists put in place. And she was also clear that this is probably the only trial there will be of basic income in Ireland, even though in the programme for government, the coalition government agreed to a trial of a universal income, but the one for the artists is actually being put forward as that now. And of course, we are delighted to see that the artists have this, but we are also want to see it for everybody, for the universal model that Reinhard described. So we opened the conference with the novelist Michelle Gallen. She's not a BIA recipient, although she has received Arts Council grants for her work. And Michelle really engaged us with stories from her life about how a basic income would have helped her at many points in her life when she was struggling. And she had a very good stroke, by a stroke of fate, while she was living in Belfast. She's from Northern Ireland by birth. She got an allowance from the state, which, because of the political situation in Belfast at the time, nobody came to check on her, and that the allowance continued for much longer than she expected. And through having that, she was able to regain her mental health. Nobody imposed any conditions on her. She was able to spend the money as she pleased. And she emphasized that this kind of good fortune should actually be something that everybody gets, that it shouldn't be just a stroke of luck. So she was very clear that while she believes in the scheme for the artists, she is a strong supporter of universal basic income. Then we had a short report from Garroy Jody, who's a BIA recipient, and he offered some insights into life on a basic income, which would probably strike a chord with many people here. He described quite interestingly how he was able to leave a job that he really did not like once he got the basic income, and was able to focus on the work that he wanted to do, and then was able to do kind of odd jobs to supplement the income. And this struck a chord with people in the audience who weren't artists, as well as the artists present. And then we turned to the figures and the number crunching with a report from Dave Quinn and John Baker, both of whom are here this evening. And they have developed a model for payment of a genuine universal basic income for everybody in Ireland right now. It could be put in place right now. It would be pegged at the rate of the job seekers allowance in 2019, which is €203 per week. The full paper is available on our website, and I'll put a link to it in the chat shortly. But I just want to point out some features of the model that are very striking. The way they have worked it out is that it's very closely aligned with the current IT systems used by our revenue and social welfare departments, and thus it could be implemented immediately, or almost overnight. It's exchequer neutral, so it wouldn't cost the state any more than it's currently paying in transfers. And employers' PRSI contributions would be a little higher than they are at present, but at present they are lower than in many other countries. So it would just be bringing the contributions of employers into line with other European countries. There are many other points but I won't go into them now because you can read them there. I suppose the key point is that while it is one model only of payment for basic income, it's one that could be implemented immediately. It doesn't rule out any of the other things that Reinhard mentioned, like broadening the tax base, closing down tax havens, even monetary reform, and so on. In fact, it would support volunteers working on campaigns like that. So really, it has been shown that it's doable now, and the opposition is largely ideological. And of course, Reinhard mentioned the need for the political will, and the opposition being ideological too. So we're very much of one mind there. The discussion really then within the conference expressed a lot of frustration that a universal basic income isn't already in place in Ireland. And I suppose, if anything, coming together like this, it was our first event in person since COVID. We've had many events online, but it was our first in-person event. It just reminded us all of why we continue striving for a universal basic income, and of the humanity and the kindness and the support and the healing that it can offer to everybody, not just the artists who are make such valuable contributions to our world, but to everybody else who's capable of contributing as well and who wants to participate. So I'd like to congratulate the UBI Labs UK people for organising this series of events and for including us in it as associate organisers. We're very pleased to be here, and it's now time to hand over to the rest of the gathering. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anne. Always really useful, and to Reinhard as well for giving us the great context in terms of the overall ideas behind universal basic income and the context in Ireland as well. I'm Andy from UBI Lab Arts. I'm also aware that this is the third in the series of presentations of or check-ins with the artists on the basic income for the arts pilot scheme. So we are doing a bit of repetition now in terms of saying who we are and what we've done, but I'll do it very quickly this time in case some people haven't looked at the previous recordings from the sessions. So UBI Lab Arts was set up by a group of artists and art workers that are all interested in universal or unconditional basic income. We set it up in September 2020 as part of the overall UBI Lab Network that this event's being hosted by, and big thanks to Johnny for setting this all up for us. We were one of the only, or one of the first, non-geographical UBI labs. So the other parts of the network, there's a UBI Lab Leeds and a UBI Lab Bristol, and actually we set one up as UBI Lab Arts, not for artists that are advocating purely for universal basic income for artists, but more artists and art workers that were interested in using the arts or their creative activity to deepen and broaden the conversation about universal basic income. So, from our point of view, as artists, there's other ways of advocating and kind of making the case for a universal basic income. But of course, this basic income pilot in Ireland's provided an incredible opportunity to bring some people together to talk through how that might work, and acknowledging that artists are also part of society, not apart from it. So provide interesting case studies. So the way that we've been doing it with UBI Lab Arts, aside from these check-ins with the basic income for the Arts Ireland participants, has been through, what were quarterly, probably much less, I think the last one did actually happen over a year ago now, creative practice sharing sessions. So if you look at the recording from the previous sessions, you'll find our YouTube channel, and on that there's kind of a good archive of different types of artistic and creative projects that could go towards broadening and deepening the conversation about basic income and universal basic income, either through participatory projects or theatre projects or exhibitions. So that was kind of our main idea, really, to bring that together, as well as sort of sharing some ideas and publishing information about the creative case for basic income, which I guess is a fairly English specific idea, but sort of thinking about how the creative case for diversity is played out within the Arts Council, and how a similar argument could be made for using the arts. And also working in partnership with other sort of organisations and other UBI labs to lobby for pilot schemes such as these as well. So you can check out our YouTube channel to sort of get an idea of what we've been doing there, and sort of as I say, the archive of the projects is really the sort of the main trace from what we've been working on. So about a year ago, we had our first check-in with three of the artists from Ireland who have got different relationships to the pilot, either as recipients or that are in the control group, or people that they'll explain their sort of background as we go around. And really, the idea, as Anne's said, is to kind of get this head and heart kind of conversation going about basic income. So what we were particularly interested in is artists being case studies of people with lived experience of basic income and recipients of basic income, and how that affects maybe a community or a type of practice. So there's a lot to be drawn from this, but we wanted to keep it quite kind of anecdotal, and just the idea of how's it unfolding. Our first check-in was this time last year, wasn't it, or sort of a year tomorrow, and was much more about speculating on how this thing might play out and what the process of going through it was. And so it's just great to be joined by Alisha, Shane and Tadhg again to allow us to check in. And I've got a list of questions that we'll kind of go through, but I'd like to just sort of begin by handing over probably Shane as the first artist, and just ask how's the experience as for you at the moment, and what's changed since last time.
Hi again, Andy. Thanks. I suppose also for context of people who are joining who weren't maybe at the previous events and haven't seen the video. So of the three of us, I'm not in receipt of the artist basic income. I am on the control group, which is a group of 1,000 people who were selected, aside from the 2,000 who got the basic income, who are providing updates twice per year on how things are going, not having the basic income. I think we probably have kind of a lot to catch up on. I'm just because there's a second, and because you've called on me, Andy, I'm going to just give a kind of a very relevant and prescient kind of point about the updates from the scheme itself. So this morning there was an open panel discussion with the Minister for the Arts, Catherine Martin, and two other members. One was the chair of Praxis, which is the artists union, who's also an artist who's in receipt of the artist basic income, and the other was the I think it was also the chair of the National Campaign for the Arts. I can't remember her position, but they spoke. But mostly it was the focus was on the minister speaking about the campaign to date, what has been a success, what is being worked on. So this is the same minister that Anne spoke about, that spoke at the beginning of the UBI event earlier this year. And Minister Martin then went on to say that the first survey has been released only a few hours ago. She pointed out that it was going to be released today, so it was kind of like it was just absolutely bang on time, and I've had a chance to go through it, and I think possibly Alisha and Tadhg also maybe had a flick during the day. It really does have some kind of interesting information, both for that kind of like head and heart discussion that maybe we can go into a little bit as well as we're here. But I won't kind of keep talking on that. I'll give Alisha and Tadhg a chance to kind of reintroduce themselves maybe first, if that kind of makes sense, and then we can kind of go into deeper discussion. That sound okay? Yeah.
I will take that as a lead in. Hi everyone. Just the same as Shane, just a very quick background. So I am an artist who is in receipt of the artist basic income at the moment. I wasn't initially selected, but unfortunately for 29 participants who were, they were deemed ineligible at that point. So they re-lotteried the 29 places, and I was fortunate enough to receive one in the second round. Yeah, Shane, thanks for bringing that up. Actually, I think that's a really good place for us to kind of start our conversation tonight. And I think the points raised, I definitely would feel, I think would reflect my own experience of it so far. So again, for context, for anyone that's here that hasn't looked at any of the previous conversations, I've spoken a little bit about, you know, that experience of being part of the pilot, and maybe the pressures that get put on you to feel as though you have to perform a certain way in order for the research to be quite a positive thing, or maybe not knowing what the research questions are kind of being posed, or what's going to be looked at in terms of the research. But I suppose going through that now twice with the survey data, it's becoming a little bit clearer what exactly is being looked at, and getting the results today as well. So yeah, I'll let Tadhg jump in, and then yeah, maybe we can go from there.
Hi, my name's Tadhg. I'm an artist, and I have been in receipt of the basic income for the last year or so. And I didn't actually realize that the report had been released today, so I was just frantically trying to Google there and read it all really quickly in those 2 or 3 minutes. But yeah, I'm interested to see what's there. I can imagine that. I mean, it shows a positive impact. It says I can imagine there would be a positive impact. I can imagine for those who have received it. So yeah, I guess it's kind of how it proceeds, I guess, from there, and how it continues to impact on people's lives, and then what happens at the end of it. Those are the kind of the big questions, I guess. But yeah, I'm not sure what should we cover. Should we speak more about what we've actually been doing or not doing, or what? How do you want to go about it, Andy?
I mean, it'd be lovely just to get an update. I think the report and the release of the report is certainly like something that we should talk about, and obviously that's giving a sense about what the overall impact is. But I would just like to hear a little bit more just about how it's been affecting you and your practice since we last spoke, which was sort of 6 months ago. Any kind of developments in terms of what you're doing, or just your sort of feelings about it as well. I mean, I think people would just be interested to know what it is that you do and you make, and how being a recipient might have affected what you're doing. Yeah.
I guess in my own case, it's in a way it's an easy thing not to notice, because it's kind of, it just appears every month. And in another way as well, it's easy not to notice in that I was fortunate enough over the last 2 or 3 years previous to have been getting by all right, that I was able to get by from my work as an artist. And my costs were low, my rent was low, I didn't have big expenses, so I was getting by. And now I'm kind of getting by more comfortably, I guess. So sometimes I feel like people are a little disappointed when I say it hasn't changed my life beyond all recognition. I haven't bought a fur coat or anything, but yeah. So I have tried to think and reflect on it, and I guess try to do less in some ways, not kind of be as busy kind of chasing things down, and just trying to focus a bit more. So I am doing work for an exhibition in February, and I'm just trying to just trying to get the head down, and I guess not having to take on other bits of work here and there, and that allows me to kind of create more focus on the thing that I'm supposed to be doing, making nice pictures.
Great stuff. And what about you, Alisha? Is it kind of, have you noticed anything sort of changing with your practice or your circumstances?
Yeah, I mean, background, I'm also an educator, and I was, or currently kind of semi full-time, but I'm about to take a step back actually, which is great. So I'm really looking forward to that. I'm actually going to reduce my teaching hours to focus on my practice, and I can do that comfortably knowing that I have the basic income there to support me. So, I've always tried to juggle both. So that's, I laughed at Tadhg talking about slowing down, and for me that is slowing down. It's sort of being able to change trajectory a little bit, and give that the focus, because at a certain point in life you're trying to achieve all of these other life goals. You want to buy a house or a car or have children or whatever it is, and so having a mainstay like a teaching job and a pensionable position sort of lends itself to you going, well, I guess the arts practice is ancillary. It's it's secondary to that. And for me right now, I'm able to actually say, do you know what? I can put that on hold for a little while, because I have an opportunity here to really give focus to my arts practice. So yeah, that's something I'm really looking forward to, and it's just a few weeks away. So yeah, that's absolutely massive, and it's something that I've been trying to get. I mean, we're just over the year mark now on basic income, and obviously I've always worked my art practice around an academic calendar, higher focus times in my arts practice in the summer months and midterms and that kind of thing. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what's going to come out of actually reducing all of that schedule. I've always had to turn things down if they were during an academic calendar, commissions and things like that. So for me, it's slowing down, but also saying yes to things that I would have said no to before.
Excellent, thank you. Yeah, I mean, these are the sort of the case studies, or the elements of the case studies that are just as powerful. I guess that have also been picked up in this report as well, or sort of condensed into little statistics. But it's really good to hear from you as well. I mean, before again we get into that, I remember when we had our first check-in, and one of my questions was, how's this this scheme being received within the artistic community? How, are people talking about it? What's the general conversation that's happening? And it seemed that certainly at the beginning, maybe it wasn't as out in public as maybe people had expected, that you weren't even sure who received it. There hadn't been kind of like you didn't have to tell people whether you'd got it or not, and it hadn't sort of bedded into the everyday fabric. Is it become a more usual conversation within sort of either the artistic or the family circles that people are receiving it now? Are people sort of, is it part of the everyday discourse?
Everyone I've spoken to and about it, or who I've told that I've been receiving it, they've been quite positive about it. Maybe, I don't know, maybe that's exceptional, I'm not sure. I know in other chats in the check-in during the summer, and I think in your first meeting as well, there was reticence on the part of some people who had received it to advertise the fact, I guess, and that there were some hurt feelings, I guess, amongst some who did not get it. So, and I guess as well, there's almost an element of secrecy built into it, in that they can't share the information of those who are taking part in the scheme, for all sorts of privacy reasons, I guess. So there's a funny thing where, like, if you get spotted speaking about basic income on a forum like this, and then you get emails from different individuals and groups asking you to speak or contribute to some event they're doing on the topic. So it's a friend of mine has been on Al Jazeera, NBC, RTE, News Talk, all of them. So it's funny that way, but yeah. I don't know what your experiences of that are, Alisha and Shane.
Shane, do you want to come in, or?
No, go ahead. I'll speak up.
Yeah, I suppose I was one of those reticent parties. I felt a little bit like I shouldn't have gotten it, because I wasn't meant to, and then I did. And a lot of the rhetoric that was appearing online after the fact was kind of negative, and not from artists specifically, but just the premise of universal income. So I was a little bit slow on the uptake of conversation, and but I have had some interesting conversations in the last month or so, particularly with family. And that's just another point. So obviously, Ireland context, we're going through a housing crisis. I was one of those people served with a legitimate eviction notice. Unfortunately, my landlord was selling up, so I've moved back into my parents' house. So, explaining a particular circumstance to them that I probably would have avoided if I didn't have to. And my parents are working class. They were lucky to get social housing when we were kids, and that afforded them an opportunity to buy the house that they then sold, and the home that I lived in. But their understanding of it wouldn't have been what my understanding of it was. So that conversation, while difficult, was really, really informative, because they are a very particular group of our class of people, I think, in Ireland, and for them to have come through social housing to now own their own house separate to that, they realize what an advantage that provided for them. But they also lived in a smaller housing estate, and I lived there until I was 9, where that very particular class of people that are discussed in the sense of taking advantage of the state and aren't going to do anything, and all of those really negative things that people think about when they think of social support systems. They didn't, they can understand how a universal basic income can support people to actually step up in the same way that social housing supported them. So it gave me a lot of hope to have more of those conversations in the future, actually, because I thought I was going to be met with a bit of a wall when I spoke to them, where they would have put me into a very particular category of what they differentiated themselves from. So that, yeah, I suppose that's kind of given me a little bit of a fire to talk more more about it. Now that's quite a recent development for me, so I can't say I've had that conversation too many more times, but for me, that was one of the big hurdles when it came to speaking about it. And that was just a little chip on my shoulder that I had from the particular background that I have. So yeah, I'm really excited to hear what's been going on with Anne and the conference and all of those other steps that are being taken outside of the basic income for artists scheme. So, you know, that I can support that and get on board with all of those discussions, because I can feel the benefits of it now. You know, it's a year later, but I can really feel it. So, yeah.
Nice. And what about you, Shane? Is the kind of, yeah, you were involved in a lot of conversations about this pilot before it started as well. So what's the sort of general feel with people around it at the moment?
Yeah, and I think I've made that point before as well, that I work. I mean, I have co-founded an artist collective where we have a space. We work with a lot of different artists around an area that is very artist heavy in the northwest of Ireland. There are about 200 artists living in the kind of rural region that is around here, and more than kind of like the extended area. So I do have spend a lot of time chatting to artists. I would say from that, this does not come up much, but that's also probably not being in receipt of it. In fact, and I kind of mentioned this during the summer one, it's I kind of forget about it a lot of the time because it's just not there. It's not on the radar. It's not a relevant. I get this email once in every like whatever amount of time to tell me to fill out a form, and then I remember, oh, this whole thing is going on right now, and I go in and fill out a form. And another friend of mine who's also is on the same control group, we actually talked about this a couple of weeks ago and said the exact same thing, that like, yeah, you just sort of, it's out of mind all the time. Having said that, it comes up every now and again, and things like this meeting, the panel discussion that happened this morning comes up, or I'd be talking to a friend like Tadhg who would be in receipt, and it would just come up in conversation, and then we'd kind of like have a deeper dive into the sort of the effects, I guess, of like having and not having, and where that's kind of taken things to. But yeah, I mean, it's a bit strange because it's definitely a difficult thing. I think as Alisha was kind of alluding to there, it could be a difficult thing to bring up. And I would say some people would still feel that it would be a difficult thing to bring up if you were in receipt. Not if you're not in receipt, that's fine. But if you're in receipt of it, to bring it up with other people because of exactly that kind of stigma that Alisha talks about, like maybe even with their parents, that this idea that like you would be seen as being getting something that other people didn't. And despite the fact that this was a lottery, and I suppose that's maybe worth mentioning, actually. There have definitely been a couple of moments where I've been in conversation with people where they've kind of gone, oh yeah, it was a lottery, but like, you know, they for sure it was kind of, you know, it was weighted, which I don't know whether or not it was, but yeah, I mean, I can see, Alisha, I know, like, and this is the thing. I mean, I think that people will create these stories about anything, actually. Like, I mean, I think that's especially when they haven't gotten something, and when they feel that, like, you know, they're missing out on something that they haven't gotten. This, I guess, comes back to what we talked about in June, that like when a universal basic income is not universal, it creates other sort of tensions and problems that like kind of like draw between people. And I think it's very difficult to kind of reconcile. I do think, and maybe this is a kind of a point worth going into the discussion, that some of the statistics that came back from the report today that compare the control group to the artist's experience are quite interesting to kind of like draw on, but also to compare those in receipt of the basic income to the national standard, I thought were also quite fascinating. It wasn't the thing that they were kind of amplifying. I don't know, is there Alisha, did you want to say something there? You turned your mic on. Did you want to come in? Or
yeah, I mean, it's just, I think the lottery thing, it definitely gets to me, because it did feel like a lottery in the sense of those people that were selected, but the fact that you were eligible in and of itself, I think definitely meant that it was selective. You know what I mean? The eligibility of the artists nullified an awful lot of practicing artists that I know. And I think that in itself sort of cut a lot of people, that I feel like it was an unfair lottery, if that makes sense.
I absolutely agree. Yeah.
I would have thought that the criteria or the bar to entry was fairly low. that it seemed like most would qualify. So I'm interested to hear you say that.
I think the one particular thing that got me was just about being, I suppose, tax compliant or self-employed and tax compliant, because I know a lot of artists that maybe wouldn't earn enough to be registering themselves as self-employed and paying the relevant or due taxes on that very, very small level of income, or wouldn't have gone to the bother of doing that because they wouldn't have. And I would feel much at the same level as those artists, but because I had a PAYE job, it felt like I had to do those things, and I had kind of gone through those hoops, so to speak. So yeah, no, I did feel that sort of, yeah, it didn't, the criteria for that particular thing sort of that, and don't get me started on the whole tax process at the moment.
I'd agree with that. I mean, I know what you're saying, Tadhg, that there was a lot of fluidity or flexibility with how you could qualify as being an artist, but there was still a kind of like within that there was a sort of a gray. I mean, there was what Alisha was just describing, that like, you know, a lot of artists have a kind of a mistrust in the first instance of these systems, or like just feel like they themselves are outside of it, or simply don't have an income that is worth kind of reporting, and find themselves kind of not willing to report. But I think that there was also like kind of craft workers, other people with kind of precarious incomes were left out. People who work within the arts, who are on 0-hour contracts, who are not artists necessarily, but have like arts related jobs, also were excluded. No, I mean, I know you have to draw a line somewhere if you're going to run a trial, and this is the way that they decided to run the trial. But I tend to agree, Alisha, that like, you know, there was a sort of a selectivity. Somebody asked the question there, what were the criteria? They were pretty broad. You had to actually, sorry, somebody has answered there as well. That's perfect. Yeah.
So we're getting into the kind of, I mean, the sort of strengths and weaknesses of the trial as you're experiencing it, and certainly around the kind of selection and who takes part. And I suppose, you know, we've said it before, but the interesting aspect of choosing art as the criteria is, whether how much you believe in that idea that everyone can and is an artist, and the fact that it's got this very broad scale of, you know, from the professional creative industries through to the informal creativity that people do every day. So there's a self-identifying aspect if you were to sort of roll it out in other places and in other contexts. Are there any other kind of strengths and weaknesses you're picking up on as you go through? I know when we had a little preparatory meeting for this, there was some talk about the actual reporting and the surveying that I suppose has then gone into this report that's been released. So the kind of communication with the organisers that's happened was a point that I think maybe someone wanted to expand on.
Yeah, I could say sorry, Tadhg.
No, I was just only going to say that the reporting aspect I always felt was fiddly, but maybe not a major weakness of it. I mean, it has to be reported in some shape or form. The major weakness of the scheme, I guess, is that, you know, everyone else isn't getting it. You know, the major strength is that I'm getting it. The major weakness is that Shane and a lot of other people aren't getting it. And I know, Shane, you talked before it was, when it was just announced, I guess, what kind of repercussions it could have within the sector, I guess, and how, and I think you alluded to it there in the data that's been published today about the control group and group who are getting it, and I don't know, is there divergence, but how that divergence might play out, if there is one, over the next couple of years as well, and beyond the end of the scheme as well. And I guess at some point as well in the next 2 years, a weakness of the scheme will be that it will come to an end, and I presume there's a good chance it won't be taken up again. I mean, it will be at or expanded any further. Whatever successes may come of the scheme, it will be at the discretion of the government to do something with that, and there could be a different government by then. So
There was, I mean, that was raised this morning at this panel discussion a couple of times as well, and the minister did kind of allude, contrary to what Anne had said at the UBI event, did sort of allude to the idea that this would be extended or even perhaps grown. Although I don't know what the I don't know. I mean, beyond that, it wasn't very clear what that would mean. But then I suppose we're kind of at early days. I think that there was also this kind of like reference to things like what were coming out were that kind of like what you said, Tadhg, there, that people were getting more time or minutes to hours per week to experiment and to consider work in the future. I mean, it's measured in hours, and it's really weird actually when you look at it. It's actually like if you look at it at a percentage of time, it looks like considerably more than when it's measured in hours. I don't know why they decided to report it that way, but there is like a kind of a significantly higher amount of time given over to that by those who are in receipt of the basic income, and yeah, the long term repercussions of that on people who are not in receipts kind of seems like, you know, you could have like some sort of a divide that could open up, like in terms of like the quality of work that could be created or something. That's a very specific thing to running a scheme in this way, but it's worth kind of like mentioning or noting. But the other thing that I kind of thought was kind of like very relevant or prevalent about that was that both those in receipt of the income and those not in receipt of the income are significantly lower than the national average in pretty much every area in like kind of like just general comfort of living. So even with the basic income, artists who were living at a very precarious level prior to this are still living at a very precarious level. And that even, at least that's the way it was reported in the first 6 months. And of course, surveys are not perfect, but I thought that's an interesting point of like kind of discussion as well, that like, you know, it's a helping hand, but it's not necessarily ruling out or eliminating these kind of like lines of poverty that a huge amount of artists live under all the time as well. And that would need to be addressed in other ways. That's not going to be necessarily be addressed just by a basic income, and maybe it's kind of like something worth considering, even if a basic income became universal, like that it's not necessarily going to solve the problems, it's only going to lessen them. Excellent.
Yeah, thanks, Shane. I think thinking about, I guess, again, the limits of what, well, I mean, I suppose we're getting into a conversation about basic income and basic services and how those things kind of relate to one another as well. But just sort of, I remember, to pick up on something that I guess Alisha was getting at last time was the, in the reporting or the communications going back to this, there's, as people that are receiving it especially, are kind of, internal pressure maybe to say the right things in response, because you want something like this to be rolled out to a wider public. So I just wondered whether that's kind of whether you still feel the same about that, or kind of, or how that reporting's worked for you, and your sort of emotional responses to being a recipient.
Yeah, I mean, it's a funny one, because what I felt I was expected to be reporting is what I've actually started to change. So when I talk about how many hours I was working in my teaching job versus how many hours I was working my art, maybe it was a self-awareness thing about where I wanted to spend my working hours or my time, you know, to actually make the changes to allow myself to be able to do those things that I thought would make it seem a lot more attractive, that basic income allows artists to do those things. So I think probably on reflection now tonight, I'm thinking that is what I feel like an artist in Ireland should be doing in terms of spending their time. But, you know, when I think about what Shane was saying, and the hourly reporting, it is a really, really strange process, you know, to calculate your daily hours spend. And we had talked previously, I don't know if it was in one of the recordings or in one of our preparatory meetings, about, you know, being confused about what time slot to put certain activities into. You know, if you're sort of catching up with artist friends and you're talking about your arts practice, is that like research, or, you know, is it leisure time? Or if I go for a walk because it's good for my mental health, is that exercise? Or, you know, the categories of time that they have requested that we record themselves are sort of flexible, you know, in where you want to be allocating yourself for time. I think, Shane, you reflected on sort of time with family, and, you know, what do you calculate that as? Is it leisure time, like, even though it's caring for family, because those are two very distinct categories that they've put in for us. But I suppose, yeah, it's sort of self-fulfilling prophecy. You know, what I thought initially was an expectation on me to show in the research is actually something that I've begun to play out in real life terms, because that's maybe what I would prefer. When I was thinking about it, I was thinking, well, clearly I should be spending more time in experimentation mode and research mode and making mode than I am in my day job, and now I'm actually doing those things. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it totally does. It's very, I mean, it's interesting. I think this kind of, yeah, really sort of unusual mirror that you have to sort of, it sounds like you have to hold up to yourself to kind of analyze the time and the way that you spend your time. Yeah, I mean, it happens as an artist anyway, but yeah, with the extra level of kind of justifying or thinking more critically about how you exactly what you're doing with every moment will, I guess, yeah, as you say, have a self-fulfilling prophecy element to it as well. So just, I mean, Shay, I feel like, so this report that's come out, do you see yourself reflected, or your experiences reflected in whatever the headline figures are? Have we had time to have a look over it, and is it giving a true picture or something that you see yourself in? Guess that can be for for anyone that's had time to have a look at it.
Very briefly on some of the key points, I think probably it's very reflective of what I put in there, you know, as somebody that was trying to hold down essentially 2 full-time jobs, you know, together. I was struggling to a point, you know, in terms of downtime, reflections, and mental health, you know, looking after key health issues that kind of were being pushed to the wayside financially because they were too expensive. Those are all things that I've been able to manage better, or to look after better. And so I see that there's one point about, you know, the mental health of those participants in the BIA scheme being improved. I suppose that would be one that really struck a chord with me, going, yeah, actually, as somebody in their 30s who had to move back home because of the housing crisis and eviction, I'm probably not suffering as much as I would have been had it not been for the basic income, and knowing that I could change my situation if I had to, you know.
Go on.
Yeah, I think it also it's quite reflective of the experience of being on the control group, as well as kind of like understanding the experience of the basic income. I thought like there are some really interesting things that came up, particularly about like, yeah, the improvement in mental health was one of the things. The measurements, I'm starting to understand. Alisha, you were just kind of like speaking about there a little bit as well, but they seem to be kind of standardized CSO measurements for a certain kind of like way of measuring life satisfaction. At least some of them, not the hours per week, but the other ones, the kind of strange questions that are like, you know, can you afford 2 good pairs of shoes and so on. Which, I mean, even those are kind of, I like that is actually an example of one of the questions. There are lots of questions like that. There's can you afford a good raincoat and so on. Although I often, I mean, I'm not a social scientist and I don't know this like world, but I often wonder when like a question like that is asked in December and then is asked again in you know, May, that like, you know, the question might just be weighted by the fact that you kind of go, I don't need a good raincoat, and just kind of move on. But you know, I mean, we just have to accept, and I suppose maybe that will kind of like tease itself out over the course of 3 years of answers, as opposed to over the course of like, this is only the first 6 months of the trial that the results have come off the back of. But I think that, yeah, it is reflective of like the kind of like the experience of the control group, and it's interesting to see as well how things have kind of like shifted. In some cases, kind of a lot more than I would have thought, like over a relatively short space of time. But I guess, like, you know, maybe this is something worth coming back to as well. But like Alisha and Tadhg and me, when we spoke the very first time 12 months ago, and we talked about like filling out these forms and how we would fill out these forms, and how, you know, as much as possible as part of the control group, I should, complain about how difficult everything is, and like, you know, really like play as many tiny violins as possible, and how Alisha and Tadhg should almost go on as if, like, you know, they're suddenly millionaires driving 3 Porsches because everything is so easy, just so that the statistics would get weighted in such a way as the test. I mean, and everybody thinks that this would be the case. I actually think we're all too honest to actually do that in the end result. So I have a feeling that the results are probably quite reflective of the way that people really are behaving. But I mean, like, it's still worth considering that, like, you know, poll results or results that are kind of qualitative like this can be a little bit kind of difficult to wholeheartedly accept without kind of some sort of, you know, at least an extended period of time to look at the way that has changed things.
Nice. And yeah, I kind of, well, I mean, I'll take that as a bit of a cue, and also picking up on what Tadhg was saying earlier on, I suppose, yeah, we're really, you know, the momentum's picked up on the pilot now, you're through it, and almost at the point now where you're thinking about the end and coming to the cliff face, I think, is how maybe John had sort of explained in the meetings before. So, I mean, have you, yeah, Tadhg was already thinking at that point, well, what's the legacy of this, and can you see the clock ticking down? Is there anything that you kind of think you can, or how that's changing your relationship to the to either receiving or being part of the pilot group, knowing that there's a kind of a finish line in sight? What do you think the legacy could be?
I mean, I suppose the legacy personally for individuals and what constitutes success, a successful kind of time on the trial, will mean different things for different people. That it will be professional achievements in some cases, it'll be personal achievements in other cases, and we've touched on that in this meeting and in other meetings about, you know, looking after health things, or you know, being able to afford a car, or, you know, life things that you might have been putting off. So what constitutes success in that regard will look different for different people. And I guess it's always a good thing to ask yourself, I suppose, like, what do I want? And more broadly for the scheme, I guess, yeah, I mean, it's interesting. It'll be very interesting to see what happens off the back of it. And it's hard to imagine a broader UBI scheme being rolled out in society. What some people have said is that maybe it would be looked at as an alternative way to fund the arts in Ireland. I don't know, you'd have to kind of crunch the numbers and kind of say whether that would be good value for money, as it were. But then I guess you kind of quickly come into a kind of a thing. Well, then you would need to have maybe you would have to have a stricter kind of criteria as to who is an artist and who isn't an artist. And, you know, the history of art in the 20th century that's been a big question that has befuddled many more people than just the civil servants and the Department of Finance. And again, I guess as well, you get into a situation then of like, well, why only artists in receipt of a basic income? And there's been a case made for other groups in society. You can quite easily make a case for numerous other groups in society being deserving of a basic income. So then you might as well just give it to everyone then. So.
I'll just come in there, you know, I mean, we did talk in our preparatory meeting about sort of feeling as though we're at that point now and looking at, well, this is going to end and what's going to come next. But we also talked earlier about the kind of slowing down, and for me, particularly slowing down in the sense of taking on work and saying no to some work and saying yes to my arts practice. But, you know, I think the basic income is an interesting one, because even when you apply for arts funding, and Shane, you're still applying for funding, I'm still applying for funding, or at least I didn't this year actually, because I felt comfortable enough to sit on some research and keep going with research off the back of a previous batch of funding. But I'm now going to push forward 2024 go for another Arts Council funding to kind of process a project, but they also require that you pay yourself in those applications. So when you're budgeting things, it's a weird situation to have the basic income and feel comfortable that you're being supported in your arts practice, but then also still have to pay yourself out of an arts funding application, and to feel like you're almost getting paid twice. So I wonder, Tadhg, have you experienced that maybe, or Shane, have you thought about that at all? You know, in application processes and this whole pay the artist thing, and then we've got this basic income scheme sort of running as well. Sorry, I know it's a little bit of a segue, but
No, that's a really interesting question, actually, because yeah, so that might not be something that people who are not involved in the arts would be aware of. But I mean, obviously, you're self-employed, and when you apply for a grant or a project or any collaboration that you'll be working on, you usually have to write up a budget, and within that budget, you have to write in your own cost. And for a long time, those costs were not really respected, and oftentimes a lot would be shaved off them. I think certainly in Ireland over the last like 8 or 9 years, they've gotten a lot better with kind of like pushing for artist payment and making sure that artists are equitably paid at least a rate that would be similar to like a tradesperson, which is like, I mean, that's saying a lot compared to the way that it used to be. So that's just to give a little bit of context to what Alisha is saying there. So obviously you're applying for a grant, then you're thinking, oh, I'm already being paid, so what, like, can I double job this, or it treated like that, like, which is kind of an interesting context. All right, like I know I hadn't kind of considered it. I was you did kind of like make me think of something else though, and this is maybe like the experience of somebody who's not in receipt, but my income has gone down significantly this year compared to last year. This is just par for the course. I know that because I just did my tax return in November, as you do every year, and then I decided to sit down and just figure out the numbers for this year, and went, oh, actually there was a significant decrease despite the fact that I got a couple of good things. And I looked back and I kind of wondered why that was, and then I was like, well, actually probably a lot of it comes down to, I would usually do 1 or 2 projects abroad a year, which would usually bring in a fairly good amount of income. But at the minute I have a young daughter, and there was the last time I went abroad, it was very difficult, and I said I needed to take some time away from doing that, which has obviously impacted my income pretty significantly as well. So that's kind of getting hit doubly. And that would be something that, like, if the basic income was there, my income would be topped up to be kind of like something quite similar to what I had, what I would have earned last year. So that's worth kind of like sort of bearing in mind, because then when you think about kind of like the what you're talking about, like the applying for things and how you choose to apply for things, there was also a lot of kind of like decisions that had to be made there that were kind of like, I could apply for this, but even if I got it, I couldn't take it. So I have to kind of like step back from it. So that comes with the precarity of living, as opposed to the like the receipt of, like, you know, the kind of double job. I would say actually, yeah, for sure, you should be getting paid, by the way, exactly the same rate as you would have been getting paid before. That would be just my opinion. I think, yeah, I think the basic income isn't about that, but yeah.
Yeah, but like I'm that's an amazing point that you're making though, because you know our lives will continue, right? And I mentioned all of those other things: having a family, getting a house, getting a car, whatever those very specific life moments that you're in. And a basic income gives you a security to say no to a job, or to say I can't leave right now because I have to do this thing at home. And aside from the double job thing, you know, that's why basic income is so valuable, because it will give you the security to be able to live your life and to do all of those things that are necessary. And yeah, I might have a kind of I don't know, an ethical issue where it comes to writing an application and feel like I'm double jobbing it, because you know we've always gotten the short straw, or you know we've not we're not used to getting this kind of money, and we sort of feel like we're taking advantage of a situation, which is probably the psychology of what's going on there. But you know, it's just like, yeah, that just really hit home why the basic income is just so valuable. And I think about a year ago I said, you know, it's the health stuff, and you mentioned you thought, you know, if I get this, then I can get these things sorted, and you know, these are the reasons why it's valuable. And it just, yeah, sorry, but that just, ah, it just smacked me across the head, being like, I can't believe that's what's after happening, you know, that we have to make those choices because we're not supported, and we're so reliant on the next grants funding or being really transient and traveling all the time, because that's more profitable. If I leave and I get a stipend, a daily stipend, which is very rare in Ireland to get a stipend to work, like, yeah, that's really frustrating actually.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, this is another conversation that I hope we can bring into these check-ins at some point, but looking at other models, not just basic income or guaranteed income, but yeah, sort of just other places that have different forms of funding that allow something like that security to happen without it sort of being called a basic income. I'm aware that we'd probably like to open it up for questions at some point, or some other voices as well, because the panel's been fantastic. I'd just kind of maybe ask you just quickly for one last thought, but because we're moving towards it anyway, but this idea of how to leverage the scheme at the moment for something like basic income, in general, universal basic income, is that kind of a discussion that's happening, or kind of something that you're feeling individually is something you're considering?
Just to mention something that's going on in the chat, and also something that came through our email chain. I haven't signed up for it yet, but there seems to be some sort of forum development to connect artists in Ireland, which I'm so on board with. I sort of left it sit unread in my inbox because I wanted to give it some time, but I see there's a little bit of chat about how to get in touch with other artists, and I don't know, maybe social media is the way to go. Maybe those of us that know about it start to kind of spread the word. But yeah, that's the only thing that's sort of on my mind. But I would love for more people to be in this discussion, definitely within Ireland, particularly now at this moment, because we still have a good amount of time left, but we're also feeling like the end is in sight, you know.
Nice. Well, I think we've also maybe got some people that have joined us today with experience of either a guaranteed income or a basic income in other countries as well. So I mean, that was the other opportunity for connecting people up, wasn't it? Not just people in Ireland, but yeah, other countries as well. Reinhard, was there someone to invite in particularly?
Yeah, there is one, Balbir Krishan, who is on raising his hand, or her hand, his hand, I think. So, and there was Tony. I'm trying to find him. Balbir, yeah. So, Balbir.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, it'd be fantastic to hear a little bit about your experience as well, Balbir, and bring that into the conversation. So yeah, what's been your experience of?
Hello everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Hello everyone. It's really nice to hear from all of you that experience actually from basic income program, and actually it's amazing to know also like this kind of program we are benefiting here in the US, that kind of same program actually going on in the Ireland also. I have no idea, but it's just amazing to know that. And so let me introduce myself first. Actually, I'm Balbir Krishan, and I'm from New York City, and I'm benefiting actually guaranteed income program, which is organized by a Creative New Build New York organization. And it's just amazing especially for me personally, means we have so many artists who basically participating in a guaranteed income program here in the US. But personally for me, this program has been extraordinary benefit. Means my case is I'm actually a disabled artist. A few years back, I lost my both legs above knees, and I'm freelance artist. I used to live in India. Actually, I grew up there. I raised. I was artist there. I was actually teacher there, art teacher and everything. And a few years back, I met my husband there, and then I left my career and job in India, and I moved to US a few years back. And when I moved here, it was for me like in 50-year age, it was like jumping in somewhere. I have no idea. Means I wasn't able to speak English back then. I I didn't understand. I didn't know who to reach here or anything. And then pandemic actually hit right away. I tried to find out few jobs. I couldn't do that. I couldn't go outside. And it was like 2 years. I wasn't able to paint like artist. Like for us is creating like everyday things, like it's give you everything, like eating, drinking, like and in 2 years after moving to US, I wasn't able to create anything. I was just busy for finding job or making some little money or doing that. And when that program came, guaranteed income program, I was chosen in that program, and then they basically promised me to give a certain amount of good money actually for 18 months. And that's changed for me everything. Right away, I stopped looking job. Right away, I stopped writing projects or writing grants, and means it's so much time consuming. Like it took like hours and hours and hours to writing those things, and result is like there's nowhere to go. Like you try in the 20 grants and you get nowhere, nothing, or you try job, you don't get. In these last 18 months, it was for me like my husband actually helped for other certain things in the family. He's retired, but he helped lots of things. But for me personally, like I get to spend more time in the studio. I created so much artwork, like that much I did not create many years. I exhibited lots of exhibition here, and now I'm actually preparing a solo show back in India, in my country actually, which I'm planning to go next year in 2024. So for me, it was just a life-changing experience, and which gave me opportunity to completely stop everything else in the world and focus what is my religion, what is my everything's, like creating just art all the time and enjoying that process. And means, I don't know, but it was an amazing life-changing experience for me, which is I'm very thankful for all of the guaranteed income program team. It's end now, so I don't know the future. I hope actually I never need to get any help, and I hope I can rely on my art, and then things can change for me. But there's a question still actually again starting. Okay, what's going to happen after 2 years or some things like that? But still, I'm very grateful for that.
Amazing, thanks, Balbir. So yeah, so I mean that's an incredible story, especially coming to a different country to experience that, and kind of and as you say, only 18 months your program that you were involved in, but having that big impact on your practice. And sort of, yeah, I mean this is an interesting question around almost being able to bring art practice back to being an artist, or to focus on the art rather than having to be an administrator or a kind of self-promoter or those other things. Is kind of, I mean, this would be a discussion that hopefully, I don't know if it's part of the reporting, but the actual impact on either the quality of art or the impact of art or the type of art that is happening would be interesting to learn about as well.
I think there is
there's someone else, isn't there?
I think there's Torri Hanna. I don't know whether she would like to talk, but I think she is from the United States as well, if I understood it correctly. I mean, do you want to say something, Torri? Or
Sure. Hi. I'm in Minnesota, so I'm in the Midwest, and I have been working in the arts for over 40 years. I'm 63 years old. And when I was selected to receive a guaranteed income, it kind of pushed me over the edge for where I've been working at poverty level for the last 20 years to being able to get my credit rating up a little bit and have a little bit of extra dependable income. And then I have been able to actually, with my daughter, make a down payment on a house. We just bought a house 6 months after starting to get this. So it kind of has been a life-changing experience. And now it's given me enough security that I can help care for my elderly mother, who is needing full-time care. So I'm changing my business model so that I can be more studio-oriented than retail-oriented, and have her with me in my store. So we're actually moving locations and everything. But it just gives me that little extra bit of security. I call it a boost of, just what I can do. And my computer crashed just a few minutes ago. I apologize. I'm on the phone now. I'm hoping you can hear me okay. Okay. And it's just been amazing. It's the first program I've been involved with where I haven't had to compete with other artists and prove that I am an artist, prove that I'm good enough, and have a specific project that the grants in America, you have to say, I'm going to do this project, I'm going to do it in this much time, I'm going to have this much money and spend this much on everything. So I have the whole budget thing. And then they don't approve it for 4 months. And by then you've moved on to something else that you want to do. And so this doesn't have that requirement, and that's been amazing. I am involved in a couple other programs. Our people here in Minnesota are called Springboard for the Arts, and they have a wonderful website that you can go on and look at their guaranteed income program. And they've started slow, but they've been expanding it from just our big city place to we are in a rural area in Otter Tail County. And so I'm one of the first, rural, I'm in a city, but it's a rural area. It's not a big city type of thing. And we're the first program that is actually in a rural area. And the little amount of income that we're getting is actually making a huge impact on, because our costs aren't as much out here as they are in a bigger city. And so just having, it's $500 a month, and it doesn't seem like much, but it just really helps. And so I've been amazingly grateful. It's for 18 months, and this is the second time that they've had this 18-month program, and they did renew it for the first 25 artists that they did in the cities for another 18 months. So I'm hoping they're getting funding, and they're going to try to expand it. And everyone I talk to about it says, oh, gee, I wish I could have that too. And I said, you should have that too. And that's what we need to work for. That's what we need to go out and try to get this basic income for everybody that doesn't have a living wage, which is a lot of people. And then we get into all the social things. We need to have healthcare. We need to have a higher basic income level, all that stuff. So, but for artists, we're traditionally not compensated for our work until after we're done, and then we have to find somebody to buy it, or we have to go out and sell ourselves. Say, go to a show or something and say, here, buy my stuff, and so we're doing all the work ahead of time, and then trying to make the money afterwards. It's not like you're working at a bank where you go in and you do the work and they give you a paycheck. And that's more what the guaranteed income is, I think, is it kind of says, go do your work and we'll give you a paycheck. And hopefully that will be good work and will contribute to our society. So.
Thank you. Yeah, it's fantastic to hear. Yeah, just the two experiences from, well, obviously across the pond, but also quite different schemes and in different contexts as well. And yeah, for sort of Balbir to talk a bit about the administration, the effect on that, but also you, Torri, I think this idea that the guaranteed income or the basic income allows a sort of more less sort of hectic way of managing the career, a sort of fairer way of kind of thinking about what the pipeline of work can be. Because I think that came through from Shane as well, that a lot of the time, if you're in a precarious situation, you almost have to overcommit to lots and lots of work in order to make sure that you've got the minimum coming through, which essentially creates a lot of waste and kind of unnecessary competition. Whereas actually, if everyone's allowed to manage their sort of workflow a bit better, it kind of work can be more evenly, or opportunities can be more evenly distributed. So it's really beautiful to hear that, and also the increase in the kind of capacity for care work and all the other important sorts of life activities that might fall under a practice as well. So yeah, thank you for that. Reinhard, did you have any kind of sort of is that our international?
Yeah, I don't know whether I cannot recognize whether anybody else is from the United States, but if you are from the United States as artists and want to say something, please raise your hand or indicate, or otherwise, if anybody else from the audience has a question, burning question. I didn't find any other sort of questions in the chat which have not been already answered in the discussion. Please, I think there's no sort of nobody. Yeah. I mean, if there's nobody else, I mean, I would just like to comment on two aspects. I mean, because I'm sort of by training a sort of public health person from academia. I mean, what Alisha, for instance, raised about her changes in her life, in her practice. I mean, I think the limitation is, the way I understand the Irish pilot, it is focused on quantitative data. And so it's very difficult to, unless you do some qualitative research, to interview people and ask them about their change of practice in order to integrate it into the pilot. And it has to be a mixed methods study rather than a quantitative study. And so this, unfortunately, is then ignored in such a study. And the other point I wanted to make, I think also Alisha raised it, she gets paid for some additional sort of for her work, or she claims that she wants to get work. And I think that is exactly the problem of a basic income pilot project, because you cannot imitate the financing. In real life, if it would be to everybody, people obviously would also have to make contributions through whatever scheme it would be it income tax, value added tax, or some other scheme, pollution tax. But obviously this doesn't exist in the pilot. So at the moment, it appears like additional money on top of the basic income. But if you, in real life, in a real basic income situation, there would be money raised also from the people in order to finance the basic income, which would be different from such a pilot, which is obviously just imitating the way giving the basic income to people and then analyzing, researching how people, what is the situation, what is their change in terms of health, arts practice, and other types of practice. Thank you. I think Anne wants to say something.
It's just very quickly in reference to something you said there, Reinhard, that in the model that John and Dave have just developed, it's only very high earners who would be paying more income tax under that particular model. So I think, and it has actually attracted the attention of the tax justice campaigner Richard Murphy. So it'll be very interesting to, I know he's liaising with Dave about it at the moment, so it'll be interesting to hear what he has to say too.
Yeah, there are different financing models, so there are sort of, that is another completely separate issue and could take up a whole day of discussion or even more. I don't know whether there is anybody else who would like to say something or contribute, because we are almost at 8 o'clock. So is there anything anybody would like to say or contribute to the discussion? Otherwise, I think we can I can make a few summary remarks. Andy, have you got anything else you want to say, or anybody from the three Irish artists, Jane, Alisha, Tad? No?
Really quickly, Reinhard, there, just in relation to the quantitative, qualitative data remarks, we are being given space to reflect on any changes to our circumstances, and while keeping ourselves anonymous and not identifying ourselves through very, very particular situations. You know, I've been able to reflect on, say, my living circumstances and how that's changed, and I would hope to be able to do the same in terms of, you know, the impact of the changing my working week has had at a personal level through a sort of semi-interview space. So there is a window for us to offer our comments for that to be captured as well.
Although that actually isn't referred to in the report, so it's hard to know what they're doing with that yet either. It's not
Fair
actually.
point, Shane. Fair point.
Yeah, I think the report, when I quickly read through it, is just to try to get quantitative data in order to show a significant difference between the control group and the ones who receive the I mean, at the moment, it's only a preliminary report, but that seems to be the aim of the overall survey study.
I would think that arguably what we're doing here is actually the qualitative response and this type of thing. And actually, there's quite a lot of this happening I mean, a lot of these conversations are happening, and it mentioned as well at the UBI conference. Like, so artists being brought to events or being kind of like brought into conversations about the broader impact of this. There was something as well about like the financing that was kind of interesting that you said there, that they mentioned in the panel discussion earlier, and I thought it might be worth mentioning again, is that it was also noted that because there was more flexible income being given to people who were in receipt of the basic income, they were also spending more money hiring other artists and other arts practitioners and other people like designers and publishers and so on. So there was a kind of a fluidity of that income that was sort of like flowing around to other people, not just to the people who were in receipt. And I think it's kind of, that's an interesting point to sort of like consider as well, that like financing this is not just that it would be like sort of a black hole for money, but it becomes part of like a cyclical economy as well that kind of starts to feed itself and starts to feed all the other people who are part of it as well, which is everybody in theory.
Yeah, and that has been shown also in other basic income trials, like in Namibia, that it has a multiplicator effect on the wider community, and that the money is spent and actually strengthens the economic activities of many people in the area, or in the, if it's a group of people who receive it, that they sort of pass it on and help strengthen the economic activities or artistic activities of other people. Yeah. So the other thing I wanted to say, I mean, also it came out a bit, is again linked to the study trial, is because this tries to imitate the real basic income situation. So it's a lottery to give it regardless whether you need it or don't need it. I mean, our US American friends said, oh, they were selected because there was some need identified, but here the trial actually tries not to identify need, but just give it by lottery, so that anybody can get it, whether the person needs it or doesn't need it, in order to imitate a sort of real life situation where everybody would get such a basic income. So that it's a sort of part of the sort of the study approach, in order to make it sort of as realistic as possible in a study. So regardless whether you have been identified or whether you need it or you don't need it, if you win the lottery, you get it, and if you don't get it. So to that, but in real life, it would, I mean, if it were introduced, it would be given to everybody. And that would also, as somebody mentioned, I think it was Alisha again, about the stigma. I mean, one reason why one wants we propose to give it to every person is exactly to avoid the stigma situation. Some people sometimes say, oh, why should Bill Gates or Elon Musk get it? Exactly, so that nobody is sort of put on a sort of pedestal and say, oh, you get it or you don't get it. So everybody gets it. And the ones who are very rich don't really need it, but they will pay back anyway through the financing scheme of the basic income. And other reasons for giving it to everybody is obviously, with any sort of assessment, you have a false negative and false positive results. So no assessment can be perfect. So if you start selecting, you will always get people who should get it but don't get it because there was something not going well in the assessment, or the other way around. So rather than going through this process, it would be better to give it to everybody. And then obviously with any assessment, there is a power differential between the assessor and the assessed. And again, you can avoid this if you give it to everybody, rather than trying to identify people who need it and the ones who do not need it. So that's just what I wanted to say, sort of as a summary of when I was listening to this very interesting conversation, which I think was very enlightening and very helpful. And I really enjoyed it, and I hope everybody else enjoyed it and found it useful and interesting. And I would like to thank our Irish artists, Alisha, Shane, and Tadhg, and also our colleagues from the artists from the United States, Balbir and Torri is still there, yeah, for their contributions, which were also very interesting and helpful. So thanks a lot for coming. And we are planning another event in 6 months' time on the 5th of June, 2024. So keep an eye on the space and announcements that we will probably try to sort of refresh and see how the experience has evolved over the next 6 months. So otherwise, thanks to Andy for moderation, facilitation, and again, thanks to all the artists, and thanks for all the people who are still here for their contributions. And yeah, I hope we will achieve it sooner rather than later, that we have a truly universal basic income for everybody. And maybe the artists can also help by promoting it to sort of encourage society to get interested and support the concept of a basic income for everybody. Thanks a lot. And
thank you, Reinhard.
Thanks.
Thanks
Thank you. Have a good evening. Enjoy.
Thanks, everybody.
And I hope
Bye.
and peaceful Christmas period and a good start, happiness and health in the new year 2024. Thanks a lot. Have a good